Got it.
All right. Hi, everybody. Sorry for the technical glitch that we had. Believe it or not, this is probably like maybe the 15th one of these we've done, and this is the first time this has ever happened. So we're in the middle of having a really good conversation, and of course, in true technological form, I got kicked off of the simulcast, and so we're waiting for everyone to return. Of course, our resident expert, Angela Walton-Raji. We're waiting for her to rejoin us again to be a part of the conversation. We'll be, I'll be listing both of to the recording so you don't miss anything that happened at the beginning of the conversation. Some of the conversation did ensue once the recording ended, but the people on our panel are nice enough to stay around long enough to rehash what we talked about a little bit, and they remember sort of some of the things that we were discussing. So hopefully with that, we won't have the same issue we just had. So I think, thank you, James, for being willing to stay on a little bit longer so people can get their questions answered. What we're going to do is we're going to reblast this link to everyone so that they have access to it. So then that way, if they were watching live, they can continue to watch live. I think we were in the midst of having a conversation about the whole Indian princess phenomenon. Anybody want to chime in on that before Miss Angela gets back?
Well, I guess I posed that question, but and what it was is we find, as all of us are researchers and we help a lot of other people, and a lot of African Americans will, definitely know of oral history, or say you got long hair, your features, you got Indian in you, or your great-grandmother was an Indian. So I was asking Angela about that because she does a lot of Native American research. And what we're finding with DNA, that a lot of what we think is Indian or Native American is actually European. So, and that's with African Americans are finding out with the DNA that it's more European than it is Native American, because we get that Indian princess story, whatever, long hair, great-grandmother, and my family was one of those, to be exact, because on the Murphy line, my great-great-grandmother was supposed to have been a full-blooded, Native American, and I got mama here. We did DNA. My first cousin on my daddy's side did DNA, and on daddy's side, no Native American, not even a sliver showed up. The Native American is on my mother's side, which was very interesting because I'm in my 60s and I've heard that oral history for 60 years, about the Indian and the family and the Irishman and the Indian. Well, the DNA does not lie, so we don't know how that originated. And again, it might be just the look of certain features that we now have come to know that you want to identify a Native American with, which again, still doesn't say they're Native American because they got long, straight hair. In my Native American ancestry got hair, I'm going to say nappy, curly, frizzy, whatever. It's not straight hair. It's more frizzy, than the image we see on TV. So, and Angela was commenting that it's not just African American, because Europeans or European Americans are saying the same thing. So there is something about a connection with Native American that people like to associate with versus an African American. And so, and it's an interesting fact, why, I don't know why and don't understand it. And so that was it. And I think, James, you had something you were going to chime in about.
Yeah. Well, basically, what I was going to say, I was going to ask, and I know Angela could probably go into a lot further depth than maybe we need to tonight, but was just as an outsider looking in, because I'm not, when I say that, I'm not a descendant of any family from that particular region, at least as far as I know. It seems to me, even from watching the Genealogy Roadshow, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, when the young lady was, she had the Cherokee Freedman ancestry going on. It seemed to me as though there was like more of a willingness to kind of accept the possibility of Native American ancestry, even if it was Native American ancestry via the enslavement process, than there was, or than there generally is to accept the white ancestry or to be
Yeah.
accepted by them. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, obviously, I know that there's some litigation, and I'm not the expert on that or anything like that, but it just seemed to me as though, I think to answer your question, the interesting thing to me about the relationship between African Americans and Native Americans, or the imagined relationship or the oral history of those relationships, is that I think that for us as a community, that, and again, not speaking on Arkansas or Indian Territory, but in general, I think that Native Americans were the only real sign of resistance that we as Africans saw to white imperialism, and how do you justify, if I'm your brother and Shelly, I'm picking on you because you and True, y'all a little lighter, if you're my sister or my mother or what have you, how do I justify, how do I make straight, how is that your mama but your daddy this color or your grandmama this color, how do you justify that, without saying, what, my grandmother was raped, or this is what the situation, or you say, well, I got a little Indian in our family, or whatever the case is, because obviously, I think almost every black family historian I know of has had that same experience, myself included. And the thing that I came to realize with my particular ancestors, which on my mother's side, which was interesting, was that I had heard this stuff all my life, and then when I researched the people who owned them, who slave owners, a lot of slave owners on my mother's side had one thing in common: they were actually people who were killing Native Americans. So
the slaveholders were?
yes. So
Okay.
that was a common theme. I mean, again, they're like pioneers basically coming from, a lot of them coming from like the Carolinas, moving into Alabama. And you have to realize, I don't know, Shelley, I don't know if you and I have ever had this conversation, but my maternal family, we're like a pioneer family for Alabama. So I have documentation. My fifth great grandfather, Zeke Weems, was, it said he was the first man of African descent to live in Henry County, Alabama. Well, what was going on before he got there? They were pushing the creek west and trying to kill and shoot and war and all of that. My Hightower line, same thing. My Gordon line, same thing. And as I started to notice this trend, I said, you know what? You don't kill people and then let them have sex with your slaves. It just doesn't. and then of course my DNA never showed it. No documentation ever showed it. And I just had to tell my mama and all of them, like, look, it just is what it is. But
Well, and you bring a good point, because it's interesting, and we mentioned that I pointed out about Sally's your great grandmother, correct, Angela?
Correct. Yes.
And she was born a slave, and is she also Choctaw and African, or was she a slave of just a Choctaw and no
Her
African?
mother was enslaved, and her father was Choctaw.
And her mother is what?
Meaning her mother, Amanda, her mother was enslaved.
What was her ethnicity, her makeup?
As far as I know, her mother was black.
Okay.
Although it is also believed that her mother was mixed. Mixed how? We don't necessarily know that. But her mother, having that African blood in the land of the one drop rule, she was enslaved. And she was a slave of Nell Perry. And so, that's really sort of all that I really know in terms of Amanda's ethnicity. And Amanda's mother was Kitty, and Kitty came west on the Trail of Tears with the Choctaws. And her name is on the immigration roll. So Kitty.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
Amanda.
I would say something I would also add, because I think as researchers and presenters, we have these conversations quite a bit about tracing your ancestors to the Native American princess or whoever. I think it's very important for us, definitely, now that we've got our call back online and recording, is to talk about exactly how you trace to these things. Out of the people who are on the call tonight, out of the six of us, me and Angela both have ancestors who were former slaves of people who were in the 5 civilized tribes. Her folks were from the Choctaw, mine were for the Cherokee Nation. And you know, there was an episode of and I was about to say Antiques Roadshow. Forgive me, Genealogy Roadshow.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, not the one about the desks and the faces, but the one about people. There was a recent episode where a Cherokee Freedman descendant was on there, and they brought up the Dawes rolls and the application packets and things like that. And so, Lord, people keep trying to call me, trying to get back on. Excuse me, I'm going to have to close out of this window so people stop sending me messages. Anywho, but we need to really discuss how to research in these areas, because I don't want people to feel as though, you know, we're kind of talking pie in the sky about some of this stuff. You know, I think the point we're really driving home right now is that folks need to be aware when they're, you know, when they're saying things like, oh, my so-and-so was this and my so-and-so was that. You got to be really cognizant of just, you know, what exactly you're saying. You know, when you indicate, you know, my ancestor was this or my ancestor was that, or you're saying, you know, that they were Native American or whatever, and you're of African descent. Hold on just a second.
Talk about the record site where you're doing that Angela talked
about.
Yeah,
I was going to say, well, and that's the thing. Okay, so she did discuss that, but
the 3 record sets on Ancestry.
Yes, there are the 3 record sets on Ancestry. That was on the recording, correct?
I don't know. That's why I'm bringing it back up. That was only the point.
I can hear them again.
So there are, while she searches out or finds the 3 record sets that are on Ancestry. 4. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
There are 4 record sets that are on there. Primarily, if you're talking 5 civilized tribes, you're discussing Dawes cards, Dawes applications, or what are called the application packets. There are a number of different roles, especially if you're a Cherokee Freedman. You've got Current Clifton. There's so many different roles. I actually went and grabbed some books that I actually bought. There are 2 different books that are basically transcriptions of the various roles from the Cherokee Nation. And these have the listing of each of the roles on there, and you can look through here. And this was my proof based on that National Archives record group that this source is, that my ancestors actually left with their slaveholders before the big group came for.
They were early settlers.
They were early settlers. Okay, so we're gonna mute Renata because there's too much noise. All right. And so, so that's the thing. Half of my family came on the Trail of Tears, and the other half came as early settlers. They left before everyone else did. And so, you know, you would research that just as like you would of a slaveholder, right? You're looking for the slaveholder. Where are their names listed on the rolls? You know, same thing as looking at wills, estate paperwork, tax rolls, all those sorts of things. Just because these are Native Americans or people who live in Native American areas does not mean that you don't, you know, trace a slaveholder like you would trace a slaveholder who lived in the quote unquote traditional South. Or historical South. Go ahead, Miss Angela.
I just wanted to mention a point, just as you were just now saying, just as you would trace a slaveholder. Well, I want to also point out, of course, the Dawes cards, which actually I should have sent you some images that you could have put on the screen. I apologize for not doing that. On the Dawes card for freedmen, for those who were once enslaved or their parents who may have been enslaved in the tribes, the name of the slaveholder is always listed. Once you have the name of the slaveholder, you have already a green light pointing you directly to sort of an earlier past. And just as you would with a white slaveholder from Tennessee, you may at some point pull up the 1860 slave schedule. Well, let me point out the 1860 slave schedule for the state of Arkansas. When you pull up the slave schedules, at some point in time when you're going down the list of the counties, you will see a subset called lands west of Arkansas. I think on some sites, I'm not sure if it's Family Search or Heritage or Ancestry, it's called Indian Lands west of Arkansas. But nevertheless, in the 1860 slave schedule from Arkansas are all of the slaveholders in Indian Territory, including Chief John Ross, Chief Peter Pitchlynn, Chili McIntosh or Willie McIntosh, and on for the tribes. The 1860 slaveholders in Indian Territory are identified, including the Native American slaveholders. So again, that would be something that would be a useful tool. However, prior to that, I would strongly recommend looking at some of those earlier census records, and there are four. And the way I find them, because sometimes the navigation, if you are within Ancestry, if you type in Dawes cards, you're going to end up in an index. You're not going to end up with the cards. There are four collections on Ancestry called Oklahoma and Indian Territory. You got to type that in. So when I go back in, I go to Google. I type Ancestry, Oklahoma and Indian Territory. That will bring up four collections that have the same beginning part of the name. However, the first collection is Marriage, Citizenship, and Census, and that covers 1841 to 1927. The second collection, also called Oklahoma and Indian Territory, that one is called Indian Censuses, and I'm bringing it up now, and Rolls, 1851 to 1959. The third one, called Oklahoma and Indian Territory, Dawes cards for the 5 civilized tribes. Mm-hmm. That's where you'll get to a color scanned image of the cards themselves, including the Mississippi Choctaw cards that are always blue. And the fourth collection, also called Oklahoma and Indian Territory, it's called Land Allotment Jackets. Now, there are other collections from Oklahoma that Ancestry does have. They have some of the Indian Pioneer Papers, which you can also access on the University of Oklahoma Western History Collection. I find those load much faster, and it's free on that site. We're talking 116 volumes of interviews of people, white, Indian, and Black, who had ties to the territory. Amazing, amazing information. And then there is another one called Oklahoma Genealogy and Oklahoma Family Resources. So there's quite a lot that's there that you can find, but those four that begin Oklahoma and Indian Territory, that's going to take you to some of the records, including the Dawes rolls, but including earlier rolls too, the Wallace roll, the Kern-Clifton roll, the Dunn roll, and some other groups as well that predate Oklahoma statehood, which took place in 1907.
Mm-hmm.
So can I ask a question, Nika? My question is, on this Trail of Tears, because we're talking about records and information that's out. Have you seen of or heard of any burial sites along the Trail of Tears where people, because I would imagine hundreds would have died, not making it, as many that left didn't all make it, but has there been any burial sites found where people would have buried their loved ones on the route? And I know it's kind of outlandish to think that, but if I'm researching, say, on that trail area, is there any records that any of you know of that people could access? It could have been the husband, the daddy, or I've never heard of any, so I'm just asking.
I would say it's sporadic because we're talking about people who are on the move. Somebody died here, somebody died tomorrow, somewhere else. And it's the same group of people who are migrating. And I think it would have, unless there was something that was noted, and that would be on local history. There would not be a documented database to sort of go through, keeping in mind that the Cherokee Nation in particular, lost 1/3 of its population on the trail. But again, which is why it's called the Trail of Tears, because they wept so much losing their loved ones who were migrating west.
Right.
And so it was called, it was a trail where they wept, the trail where they cried. And because their removal was a little bit more painful, Chickasaws had the smoothest removal. They basically went up the Mississippi, up the Arkansas. They sailed to Indian Territory because the rivers are navigable. And it's also a wealthy tribe. It was wealthy then, and it's wealthy now. And so it was not sort of the image that sort of one sees, the sort of population in need. They were a wealthy tribe at the time, and so theirs is a little bit different kind of history. So.
Something I would also add, we were talking about the Dawes cards. I have an example of those that I was going to share so you all could see it. Let me get out of here. That's the back side. Hold on just a second. Okay. Okay, so
listening to you two talk while you're pulling that up, it's fascinating because there's a lot of myths about what information is available, be it Native American, African American, people, I can't do this, I can't do that, there's no records. You're given examples of records available that people could go look at. You can search them online. Is there some that aren't online that you know of that are just at the National Archives or at a repository that you can't?
There are.
I was going to say there are, but I would caution us having a conversation about that right now while this image is up on the screen, because I don't want to get people confused.
Okay.
About what we're talking about. So we'll discuss that stuff, because there definitely is some things. There are some things that are available that you can't get elsewhere. I just pulled up a quick example. I just went into my downloads folder, Miss Angela, to see the most recent Freedman image of a Freedman card. This is actually my great grandfather's. He was a Cherokee freedman. He was born after the Emancipation Proclamation and the treaty with the U.S. government between the Cherokee.
The Emancipation Proclamation did not affect Indian territory.
That I was just about to remark on that before you interrupted me. But what was I going to say? He was born following the treaty with the U.S. government that, of course, in essence, freed the slaves in the Indian Territory. As Ms. Angela just mentioned, Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to the Indian Territory. Two separate, complete different things. If you're interested in what happened after that, I would highly suggest watching Finding Your Roots, the episode with Don Cheadle. They actually kind of go into some amount of to talk about what happened. It's not entirely factual, but it does kind of shed some light on the subject. Regardless, though, we all have our own personal opinions. I see Miss Angela shaking her head about what was presented.
Mine too.
Exactly. This is for newbies, right? We got to keep that in mind. The front of the card, as she mentioned, if he was a slave, the information would be in there. It would be under that spot that says slave of, which is about right here. So we'll flip to the back of the card, because his parents were enslaved. In fact, his father was, his mother was not. And the name of the slaveholder is mentioned here. It's listed as Elzira May. It's actually Alzira May, is starting with an A. Regardless, of course, we know in genealogy spelling does not count. So this is just an example of a Dawes card. I also have that rejected one, Miss Angela. That's a Choctaw card.
Mississippi Choctaw, MCR.
Yes. This is a card for someone who was refused or rejected. I actually often use this in presentations, so let me go back to that screen so I can share it.
Refused and rejected what?
They were not issued anything. They weren't considered to be where they were supposed to be and to be considered a part of the tribe, regardless of the degree of blood that they state that they had.
And it's rejected by the federal government or by the tribe?
By the Dawes Commission, which was, they were rejected by the Dawes Commission. Ms. Angela, you can go ahead and kind of talk about what's on this card.
Okay. This card, in fact, this is an amazing collection. The Mississippi Choctaw cards, sometimes preceded by the letters MCR, which can be considered Mississippi Choctaw refused or rejected. They, like people who were also applying in Indian Territory, were also applying for land allotments, which is one reason the Dawes records were created. It's all about the land. And now this person actually lived in Caddo, in Indian Territory, you will find a majority of the applications coming from Mississippi Choctaw are actually people who were living in the state of Mississippi, keeping in mind that they were allowed to remain in Mississippi according to the um, um, 14th article of the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit, which allowed them to stay. But nevertheless, on this card, you see over to the left, they lived in Choctaw Nation in Caddo. That IT means Indian Territory. Sarah Patterson applied, and of course, she was refused. She said she was part Choctaw. They asked her how much, and if you see under the column that says blood, she says she doesn't even know. So obviously, if the applicant doesn't know, clearly there, and this person at this point was an elderly woman. She was able to give her father's name, but she gave his name as simply Hosea, and said that he was Choctaw. Her mother was Harriet Fitzgerald, and she said, or the card is saying that she claims that her mother was Choctaw. Now, on this particular card, or in this particular packet, rather, what she is showing you as, of course, there is no backside of the card with Mississippi Choctaws. Only Freedman had the backside, that flip side, that had that additional information. But the parental information of this woman, Sarah, her father was Hosea, her mother was Harriet. Is that next image pertaining to the same person, Sarah?
Yes, this is our lovely pedigrees that we talk about.
Mississippi Choctaw records are the only records that I have ever seen that contain multiple generation hand-drawn pedigree charts. This is from her enrollment packet. You see Sarah, who's the applicant, whose name was on the front of the card. She's smack dab in the middle. But you see her father, she says, was full blood, according to, I guess, other questions they may have asked her later. And it says Harriet Fitzgerald, Choctaw, but it also says 1/2 Negro and slave. That was enough. The fact that she was in the land of the one-drop rule, that was enough to deny her, which is why she's in that refused collection. Now, keep in mind, a majority of the refused applicants of Mississippi Choctaw are not refused because they're black. There are plenty of white folks who also applied, or people who could not identify their Choctaw connection either, who were white, who are also in the MCI cards. There are over 7,000 files in the MCR cards. Now, of course, and you see the other generations that appear to the left with Lindy Godfrey. Going back to Sarah, and of course you see her father and so on, you see now, I think we're going the wrong way here. Oh, okay, to the right are her descendants, but again to the left are her ancestors as well. So these pedigree charts are amazing. Sometimes they go on for more than one page. The pedigree chart I'm referring to. The history is rich. The history is well documented in this record set. And again, this is still part of the Dawes collection. You can find them on Fold 3. You can find them on Ancestry. And usually what I do, I tend to do a quick search on Fold 3. And when I want to get a color copy of the card itself, I go to Ancestry because they scan them in color. But the history is very rich. And Shelley, you asked a question about records perhaps earlier than this, or records that you can't find online. There are records that you must go to Fort Worth, Texas to see.
Right.
Center that have yet to be scanned or digitized. And there are some records at the National Archives that also exist in Record Group 75 at the National Archives in Washington. I've looked at some of those as well. But a good portion, I am at least proud to see that Ancestry did a fairly good job with capturing a lot from Oklahoma. They went to Oklahoma to copy some very, very, I'll just say sort of scarce records that used to be only at the Oklahoma Historical Society. And they have copied those reels of microfilm and put them online too. The CTN or the CK records, which these are just abbreviations for the tribes. And of course they have multiple tribes as well that they copy from Oklahoma as well. So
something else I would add is don't forget these nations exist and they have their own government.
Yes.
So the documents that they have would mirror that of a clerk of court office that you would go and visit in a respective county. Sometimes, yeah. And so one of the things that I had to start delving into with my family was looking at wills, deeds, court cases, all that exists for the Cherokee Nation, and going through the indexes. And these are things that are not digitized, so I had to order the microfilm from Family Search and then have it sent to my local Family Search library and, go through. There was no, there weren't any magic indexing fairies for me that were going to make this text searchable. I had to go through and read the handwriting and pull out stuff, and I couldn't even get through the whole roll. I actually went and looked for what I was looking for, and I just decided to go through the entire roll just to see if there was something else that I missed. And I was so glad that I did that, because I found a lot of other documents that I possibly wouldn't have found. The other thing I would mention, as well as we talked about, try to get your ancestor back to a DOS Commission application, packet, something like that, and then use that as a springboard to get you back even further. We're leaving Arkansas a little bit. Something I thought we should also bring up as well while we're talking about researching in Arkansas is the fact that it differs from other states where you only have one clerk of court that you need to visit when you're conducting research in Arkansas. You need to go to the circuit clerk and to the chancery clerk, and there are different documents in each one of those. I just don't want to leave the Arkansas stuff kind of out there and have everything be dominated by the Indian Territory, because we could have did an entire hangout on the Indian Territory. I'm sure everyone knows that.
I would just make one addition, just the fact that people keep in mind, however, if your folks are from Kentucky, or if your folks are from Ohio, or if your folks are from New Jersey or wherever, the DAWS records are not going to reflect your ancestors. I have had people write me from Wisconsin, oh, I'm so excited I found somebody on the DAWS rolls, because they found a common name, and they were so anxious to prove the Indian that they found a name that matched a name in their family history and are ready to apply for admission to the tribe. Their folks never ever lived in Oklahoma. Their folks lived in other states, so it's important to understand we're talking primarily Oklahoma, with the one exception being Mississippi for the DAWS records anyway. There are other multiple tribes.
Well, and that just goes back to just doing sound genealogy research and family history research.
Precisely.
You don't, if you know that your family lived in Oregon, or they lived in North Dakota, or they lived in a location that was nowhere near where the nations existed, either before removal or after removal, you can't stick your folks in a place that they weren't in. And the DNA would be sort of like an additional tool to kind of reinforce that point. But at the same time, don't just look at like surnames. You want, if you've got a John Smith, you got to remember you're looking at age, you're looking at locations, family members. There's a lot of other factors that factor in. You can't just wedge people into a place because that's what you've been told. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things as researchers that we have to do, is leave behind the oral history that people have fed us for years, that we've adopted ourselves, and, kind of be open to discovering new things. So,
but my great-great-great-grandmother was Pocahontas Jackson.
Well, then then her mother read about Pocahontas, or somebody told her about it, and she chose that name. That usually might have been what it was. Something else I would say, anything else you want to throw in about Arkansas research? I would go ahead.
In terms of where to go, of course, I would strongly recommend the Butler Center as well as the Arkansas History Commission, and both fabulous repositories. And of course, there was very, very rich Civil War history coming out of the state of Arkansas. We had 6 regiments that were formed that eventually they were at one point the soldiers soldiers of African descent, and they later redesignated as units of the United States colored troops. And so I would certainly say research those regiments that came out of Arkansas, look at the local Civil War history. There are, I guess, 300 or more USCT burials at the National Cemetery in Little Rock. There are 106 burials of U.S. colored troops, the National Cemetery in Fort Smith, and almost any place where a battle took place, to pay attention to that. I will point out bounty records for the U.S. colored troops out of Arkansas. For some reason, They're in the Freedmen's Bureau. That's where the collection of those records landed.
I just wrote that.
I have put them on my blog because people have no idea that these bounty records are there. And so, yeah, and that's just by some fluke, those records ended up with the Arkansas Freedmen's Bureau, but they are pertaining to the U.S. colored troops, and I would strongly encourage people to take a look at that. If one is studying civil rights history, certainly look at records from the University of Arkansas, records pertaining to Daisy Bates and the integration of Central High, amazing history. And of course, there are a few earlier newspapers that still exist online. I think either Chronicling America may have one, and I believe there may be one in the newspaper collection on Ancestry as well.
Oh, I would also add Arkansas. It's been going down for me this week when it comes to Arkansas with newspapers on Genealogy Bank.
Oh, yes.
Because of the Arkansas Gazette. And
Arkansas Gazette, yes.
There are several papers in Little Rock. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how much stuff I saved this week from Genealogy Bank. They have some really, really good newspapers when it comes to Arkansas. That is a fee-based site. We were talking about the Freedmen's Bureau and looking for USCT troops, their records being folded in with the Freedmen's Bureau. Definitely check out the collection that is available at FamilySearch.org. That's been digitized and is in the process of being indexed. Definitely browse through that for information on bounty records. I've spent my time there this week as well. Miss Shelley asked about church records. Arkansas, to me, that's traditional research, right? In Native American nations, I have not.
Again, I would say the same thing about church records. AMEs, Baptists, church records are church records. And whether they're in a U.S. territory or whether they're in one of the states, whichever way you would pursue, I would pursue it the same way. And but nothing that's particularly unique pertaining to the territory or to Arkansas either. So, excuse me, I've got to sneeze.
Something else I would also say too. We're talking about genealogy. Just family history research in general. Arkansas was an area that was very fluid. If you have ancestors or family members that were living along the border of Arkansas or Oklahoma, it doesn't hurt to check in neighboring counties in the other states to see if your ancestors were living or had dealings in those places. It may have been that where they lived or bought land or, just handled business was closer to a particular county in a different state. And I know that exactly Mississippi and Alabama, definitely those would be, is the same thing as Arkansas and North Louisiana. I have several family members that got married in Chico County, even though they didn't live there, they lived further south. Same thing with Dacia or, wherever, Van Buren, people living in the territory, same thing. Look in both areas, but at the same time, don't shoehorn your folks into a place because it just makes sense. Really do the evaluation before you apply said shoehorn.
Well, I think the critical thing is the message is really to research the whole community, the whole county is the bottom line. It doesn't matter if I'm Arkansas, Indian Territory, Oklahoma, whatever, Mississippi, you have to research that whole community, the whole county. Don't go by the census, the one page. And I did this for years, used to say, go 10 pages back, 10 pages front, around your ancestors. And I changed that at Maggie. No, you do the whole county. And then start circling around on the adjacent counties. Because when I said Mississippi and Alabama, because I got the Lauderdale, Mississippi, and found out that these ancestors directly straight across into Choctaw, Alabama. And they're kind of directly across border counties for those two states. So if I wouldn't have thought to go any further, I would have still stayed there and said, I can't find anybody. They're gone. Where did they go? Oh, I got a brick wall. Well, people really are not that far from family. They're really not. And you just, or common names or similar connections, and then one time I even searched, and I think Angela had something to say, but the one time I searched occupations, scanning through the census to say, okay, look at all these people that came from Pennsylvania, or look at all these people, and then look at the occupation that you see listed on the census and think, well, wait a minute, was there some migration that happened? Was there something that came? And then start researching to find something like that. And you never know. What's James doing over there? Go ahead, Angela.
I'm doing, wait. I'm doing my victory dance. I just found some documentation of this is in writing. My fourth great grandfather, Robert T. Hightower, who was a white man, being named as the father of my third great grandfather, W.J. Hightower.
Ah, Yahoo!
I found it mentioned in his obituary.
Oh, what, you just did?
Just now.
Awesome!
Wow, that's
Got
great.
you some evidence there.
In writing, and it names all his children. It includes W.J. Hightower.
Wow! Awesome! Congratulations!
Thank
Happy
you.
dance!
And it also confirms part of the history that I already had been told and already kind of knew, which was that Robert Hightower, he actually gifted some land to Reverend Hightower at his for his wedding, the year he got married, and then he died shortly after. And I'm looking at the date here, looking at the location. That's my people.
There you
Wow.
go.
Congrats.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, y'all were
I
talking
wanted-
about something else.
That's great, James. I know you're excited about that. I mean, yeah, you should be dancing. I wanted to mention a record set out of Western Arkansas to take a look. If you had anyone who was even passing through the territory, look up the Fort Smith, Arkansas criminal case files, 1866 to 1900. So, I mean, this is really kind of amazing. Even if a lot of times they would just arrest people, the U.S. deputy marshals were paid by the number of people that they would bring in, even if the cases ended up being dismissed. They oftentimes got paid by the head, so to speak. And I was so surprised to find Preacher Sam, Sally's husband, he had a file there. I'm like, whoa, what did he do?
What did he do?
And it was kind of amazing. And said that he assaulted somebody, some man called Willie King, but the case was dismissed. It never even had, I don't know if they had no witnesses or there was no evidence, but you'd be surprised to see the cases that are there out of the Fort Smith, Arkansas criminal case files. Fort Smith was the office that oversaw affairs in Indian Territory. And so, which is just kind of interesting just to see. But you never know. Type in your ancestor's name on that database. So
I was going to say Ike is in there more than once.
Oh, I'm sure he probably is. Yes. But yeah, it's really kind of interesting to see them. So, and there was some woman who I've yet to identify called Silva Walton. I'm thinking, who is that? So, anyway, a mysterious ancestor, perhaps.
I had a question throwing back to the Dawes records, and the question is, because I know there's and Nika made comment on this, and I do a thing on Native American research. I mean, I can't even tell you how many type of roles there are, and stop counting because there was so many.
Yes.
But my point is, and we reflect on the Dawes more because they're associated with the 5 civilized tribes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So is there, what is the beginning date of the Dawes and the ending date of the Dawes?
Well, officially 1898 to 1914.
Okay. And then census, regular census, I'm going to say per se, kick in, say 1920, or except
well,
for the
regular
states
census was conducted. The federal census was conducted in 1900 before statehood.
Yeah, but were the Indians in the
Yes.
1900
Yes.
census.
They were on the Special Indian Census of 1910. Yes, they were.
Well, I know 1910, but 1900.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And can you get them in 1920?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and again, I'm trying to
Yes.
clarify time frame for people to go look. So you could go from 1900 to 1940.
Correct.
Okay, we're
Absolutely.
good.
Well, and then the other thing you have to consider too is if your family were freedmen descendants who went up into southeast Kansas during the Civil War and they
Yes.
remained there for a
And
period
some
of
remain.
time, which is what happened to a portion of my family, they would be on those Kansas state censuses that took place on the fives for the 5 years. So we had 1870, 1880, 1890
Okay.
burn. But in
Okay.
1875, there was a Kansas census. And in 1865, there's the Kansas census. So if your ancestors went up into Kansas, and if you're not sure if they did, check anyway just to see
Right.
if your folks were there. That's how I found my people there, was because I just said, you know what, let me check Southeast Kansas just to see. And so I would definitely suggest doing that. So when you don't have a federal census for those years, look in Kansas. That would be my suggestion also.
Did the U.S. colored troops, like a lot of, if not all, but a lot of the Ohio residents did not go with the U.S. colored troops out of Ohio. They were in Massachusetts and other places because there's a lot of them that were in the 54th Massachusetts. Was that the same type thing with Arkansas, or did they remain there, Arkansas USCT?
Arkansas, excuse me, which were the regiments, the 6 regiments out of Arkansas were original regiments of African descent, and later redesignated as United States Colored Troops. As Nika was just referring to those who went into Kansas, there are many men from Cherokee Nation and Creek Nation, primarily, who also went into Kansas. And at that time, you had several things were going on in 1861 and early 62. You had recruitment for the war that was taking place all over the place. You had 3 Union regiments that were Union. I've identified 59 black men. There are more, but I've yet to identify them with certainty, who were members of the Home Guards, with the Indian Home Guards, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. However, you also had black men who had also come from the states, from Missouri, from other states into Kansas, who formed the 1st and 2nd Kansas Colored. The 1st and 2nd Kansas Colored also consisted of men from the Cherokee Nation and men from the Creek Nation, and just a handful of Choctaw and Chickasaw, formerly enslaved people as well. 1st and 2nd Kansas Colored were later redesignated in 1863 as the 79th and the 83rd U.S. Colored Infantry. So the 79th and 83rd, who were originally the 1st and 2nd Kansas Colored, and then you have so far 50-something, 59 approximately, black men who also served with the Indian Home Guards as well. But other states, you're not likely to find. Once in a while, you might find a person who was a freedman who maybe served in another regiment outside of those 6 regiments of Arkansas, but most came either Kansas Colored and then USCT 79th and 83rd.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I don't want funny looks. I'm going to ask a question. I was going to type it in the chat book, but all right. So Nika, Angela, all of y'all. Was there Native Americans in Oklahoma Territory
Yes.
before before like the Indians coming from the Trail of Tears and all of that? And which ones were they?
Oh gosh.
Well,
I have
just
to
to
pull up a
name a
list.
few, because your average person only
Yeah.
knows the 5 civilized tribes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So my family, I have Lakota Sioux, I have Ottawa. There's even possible Kickapoo in there. People don't know about them. I mean, you only know about Ottawa if you've been to Michigan, because the whole northern half of Michigan is Ottawa Indians and whatever. But you get only educated on the 5 civilized tribes per se.
Right.
And then you have all these other, I have a map that has all these, it's an Indian name map all across the United
Right.
States.
Yeah.
So, and people don't know of those other names. So it's just a,
Yeah. I'd answer the question saying yes, there were people who were native to what became Oklahoma Territory as well. In addition, the five civilized tribes were not the only tribes removed there. The Kiowas arrived as late as 1870 into Indian Territory. You had the Sac and Fox, you have the Kickapoos, you have um, the Uchis, you have a number of tribes. Even right now, today, Oklahoma has the largest number of federally recognized tribes. I think that number is 40 or close to 40 that are there today, right now, and whose headquarters are in what is now the state of Oklahoma. But there were many removals, and in fact, if I pull up one of those collections that I was mentioning earlier, I'm going to try and pull up one and just to show you. And again, these are records that came out of that collection, huge collection of records that Ancestry copied. It's absolutely amazing to see what some of those records are, and some of them are pretty far to the west too. Some are groups that are, I just say, will simply say, are lesser known, as you were just saying.
yeah.
Yes, not just the Kiowas and the Kickapoos and the Utes and some of the other groups, but if my computer will just comply, I'll just briefly mention 5 or 6 of them. It's extensive, and Cheyenne and Arapaho, they have marriage records there. Chiloko, and of course the various districts in the Cherokee Nation, Kuwaskui, Saline, Flint, and so on. Let me see. As soon as my computer burps or whatever it has to do, I'll go down that list a little bit more. But it's amazing to see the other groups that are there. It's quite extensive. Okay, while we're
Now, do
doing that.
most Native American tribes have blended families, or just the ones we know of?
Many do, but many married among each other. Some did intermarry with people from other tribes, but like most people tend to court and date and marry people who are similar to them.
Yeah.
But not exclusively. You're always going to find some cases. And some cases, for example, like the Uchis, who did interact a lot with Creeks. And, okay, I'm just looking now. I mentioned Cheyenne and Arapaho and Concho Agency, Delaware, Mississippi Choctaw Kickapoo Settlement, Miami.
Most people's education on Native American, it comes from the TV.
Oh, well, that's why you see people wearing feathers all the time. And,
yes.
It's like, well, okay. And everybody didn't live in teepees. I think it's probably 400 years ago, maybe, when Cherokees lived in teepees. But some people did live in teepees in the 20th century. So, and again, that's, by culture, by tribe, but many people are just not.
What was the Lone Ranger in Tonto? That's the image of kids in the 50s.
Well, in addition, you had clubs, how many kids have seen, Boy Scout troops, and they have their little things that they're sitting when they're going out camping, and they put on their feathers, and what they think is Indian. And that sort of thing has gone on for a long time. And many times in the old carnivals, in the 20th century, come and take a picture, put on your Indian garb and look like a princess. I have seen cases where they have grandma's picture in an Indian headdress. First of all, women would never wear a headdress in any culture, but they'll think, see, she's Indian, see? And it's like, oh my God, okay. Sometimes you can't escape that.
Well, and I think that's important for us in genealogy because we get all this other information. And Nika made a point earlier talking about online or where the records or truths that's something about Arkansas records, someone. And the thing of it is, you take what you've been exposed to and then try to go research. And so I would say you got to open your mind and start asking questions.
You do.
And hook up into these groups, in these hangouts and stuff, because this is where you can find like record sets that you don't know that are online, because the majority of us are sitting online or getting in the car and going. but you have to be able to understand that there's different record sets, there's different record sets in each locality, and then who's the holder of the record is another thing you got to open your mind up to, because one of you mentioned, the Freedmen Bureau records. Well, why would that one set of records end up with the Freedmen Bureau records? And again, how would we even know that? And remember the guy out in Salt Lake City that made a reference to 12,000 names of slaves and their slaveholders in another record set that they had just came across. And so they've scanned those up or going to index them or something. And again, not knowing, that's why you have to dig in order to find that root.
Absolutely. Hey, I just want to say good night to everybody. I'm out, but this has been great, and I will talk to you. And actually, Nick, I have to shout you out because I signed up for Genealogy Bank just to see what they had, and then look what I found.
Good.
So y'all have a good night.
Oh, is that you found it on Genealogy Bank?
Yeah. I found some other stuff with Reverend Hightower.
That's awesome.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So you're not going to bed. You're getting ready to go do some surfing on Genealogy.
He over here lying. This is what he's going to do, because we all know, as researchers, James is going to act like he's getting, no, he's not. He's going to act like he's getting himself ready for work tomorrow, because it is 10:49. He's going to do his little shower, whatever he got to do, and then he's going to end up back at that laptop. And then we're going to see something on Facebook at like 2 in the morning. Oh, I'm so tired, blah, blah, blah. But I did verify the slaveholder father.
No, I'm telling you, I can't. I'm sitting there looking at this record, and I could not believe it. All these years, and I even had, and I think I said this, I spoke on this before. I'm sorry, I know it's a different topic, but about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a Caucasian cousin of mine who he said, "Are you alleging that my ancestor had sex with a slave girl?" And I said, "No, sir. I'm telling you that our ancestor had sex with 2 different women, and we just 2 different branches." And now I got an obituary with that ancestor, and it says right there in plain English, these are his children, and next to W.J. Hightower, it says colored. I'm done. It says colored in parentheses.
If we had, I was about to say, mic drop. If we had any, I guess if there's one site where we're bigging up tonight, is Genealogy Bank. I'm telling you, it is the gift that keeps on giving. I get so excited because, you know, when you go on the main page after you log in, and they have a little box at the top right that says, you know, however many newspapers added, you know, since June 2016. I get so excited because I'm like, oh, what do they put in there? Because it's to me, I wouldn't even waste my money on newspapers.com. I just have to put that out there. I wouldn't even do it.
I don't find much on newspaper.com, and I know Renata uses it faithfully, and I have not had success with it. I use Genealogy Bank, but you know, I've got to use it more.
I found some good stuff on there, but I'm definitely gonna check Genealogy Bank out more as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think it kind of depends on your city and what data, like you said, what data set that they have or whatever. But like this, like one thing I will say, even beyond the I was saying this in the chat to True, beyond verifying his father, I also found a record of the, what is this, December 1912 Alabama Conference of the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Wow.
And here it actually is detailing the meeting, and it lists Reverend W. Now, and if anybody follows my post or anything, that you know, I often talk about Reverend Hightower being the architect and pastor of Cherry Street AME, which is the oldest, or the mother AME church in the state of Alabama. But this record, he's not. This is 1912. So I know from 1902 to 1908, at least, that's when he was over Cherry Street. But here he's listed as the presiding elder of the Columbia District, which I never knew that. I never knew
there was a church split.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think it was a split because there's another guy here. Now this is importance of comparing your data. So it lists Reverend T.E.H. Dickerson as the pastor of Cherry Street, right? But here's the thing that I know: Reverend Hightower and Reverend Dickerson were members of the same Masonic lodge. So
they were brothers in that.
Yeah, exactly.
But they could each have a church, though.
Well, yeah. I think they probably each had a church, but I want to find out where Reverend Hightower was, or like what church was he over at this time? Because I don't know. I'm trying to slowly but surely. I'm gonna crack him. I'm gonna crack him. Yep. But anyway, y'all have a good night. Love y'all, and I'll talk to you.
All
Good
right.
Good
night.
night. Yeah.
I was gonna say we're having people ducking out. I guess we should
Yeah.
probably get some final thoughts here on Arkansas and Indian Territory.
Well, of course, each one being very, very different, different kinds of histories and different types of populations that lived there. But I would say for Arkansas research, definitely, certainly use the Butler Center, and which is in Little Rock, as well as the Arkansas History Commission, which is located in the Capitol Complex in Little Rock as well. Two wonderful places. But also become involved with or become familiar with PAC, PAAC, standing for Preservation of African American Cemeteries, a group organized in Little Rock. Also, the Benevolent Societies with a rich history, Mosaic Templars of America, Royal Circle of Friends, and several others. And of course, the U.S. Colored Troops. For Oklahoma, yes, the Dawes Rolls, but also the Western History Commission. Also, look at the special 1910 Indian Census, where the freedmen were included. Many of them were included on that census as well. Also, look at Civil War records of the 79th and 83rd U.S. Colored Infantry, and excuse me, and especially getting those sought after pension cards. And yes, there's just an awful lot that's reflective that's there. Take a look. What's on Ancestry? Remember, I find it better on Google to get the right collection. Type Ancestry, comma, Oklahoma and Indian Territory. Your computer will remember it once you do it once. And pull up any one of those 4 amazing collections.
All right. Anybody have anything else to add?
I have said enough tonight.
She said you asked way too many questions. How dare you?
Who said that?
She's inquisitive.
You talking about me?
Yeah, I'm talking about you.
It's the teacher in me to ask the questions.
She wants to clarify.
Yeah.
I know she does. She wants to make sure that she
You said the newbies out there, so I wanted to make
absolutely,
sure
absolutely. And this is
newbies.
yeah, and this is and not just newbies, but people who have been doing research and think that they've been doing it the right way. And everybody needs reminders here and there. So at this point, we've got part 2. We've been in hour. We'll have a link to both of the hangouts, pre-cutoff and after cutoff, because they've got a lot of good information.
Maybe you can edit them together and just say, system went down, continuing to make a part 2 or something.
I wish, but I have a 1.5-year-old child, and
that is true.
Love you all, but I ain't got time like that no more. So I have other stuff I have to do. But the best part about our next hangout is that we're all going to be together.
Yes, we will, at Maggie.
As in, our heads will be in the same box.
Yes, that's true.
Together.
We might have to have 2 computers in 2 different.
We might have to have 2 computers, 2 different locations. Doesn't matter. It's fine. But we got to get everybody in the same spot. What are we talking about?
I say PJ party.
Yes, let's have a party on the hangout. Yes, yes.
Now I can dance to that.
Angela and I have done that.
I'm gonna be in there
before.
Yes, we have.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, you taped the show. All of us sitting around on the bed taping her podcast.
Well, that was funny. Yes.
Well, for the people who don't know what we're talking about, we're not talking about someone's grandmother. We're not talking about the lovely, beautiful woman to the left of Miss Angela with the gorgeous hat on. That's not Maggie.
That's not Maggie. And it's not Maggie Walker.
It's not Maggie Walker. We're talking about the Midwest African American Genealogical Institute, taking place July 11th. Through 12th
to 14th.
I'm thinking the day I'm getting there. July 12th through the 14th in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the Allen County Public Library. You're thinking, why on earth would I want to go to a genealogy institute or anything of that sort? I can guarantee you anyone who has been researching even for an extended period of time should go to this, because your wig is going to be across the floor. In some good ways and some bad ways. We've seen people break down crying after the first day because they've been researching for 20 years and they didn't ask the questions that were being asked in the sessions. We've seen people rejoice because they've gotten validation because of some of the things that they were doing. this is the best way for you to get out of your shell of being just looking at the screen, using this little mouse. Yes, bring that with you, but you need to be in person and you need to learn from experienced people. I'll be there. True will be there. Angela will be there. Shelly will be there. Bernice Bennett. Shannon Christmas. Judy Russell's doing a special nighttime session.
Thomas will do a live stream.
Thomas McKenty's doing a live stream. You've got all the big names of genealogy.
And the public talk.
Yeah, Judy's got 3 sessions and the public talk, but you're thinking about the benefit. Why do I want to spend $300 for this? This is going to expand your genealogy research expertise exponentially. Guaranteed. There's no question.
Bring notebooks, not just one.
Exactly. You're not this is not a conference.
Yeah.
That's why the word conference is not being used. You will have homework. You will have things that you have to work on. You are going to leave, as I say, inspired, but we all want you to leave like you feel like you have no brain cells left because you've used them all that week.
There have been tears shed at Maggie.
Yes, there have been tears shed, but they're good tears because you're frustrated and you're challenged. That's the thing. That's what's lacking in a lot of genealogy research is the challenge. People want the quick, put it in the microwave, pull it out, it's done, okay, great. Maggie is going to challenge you. It's going to grow you. And I've seen the students and the graduates and the alumni of Maggie go on to do some amazing things with their research. And I can guarantee you.
The other day.
She did. I can guarantee you the same thing will happen. So if you're interested in attending, I will definitely leave the link in the description section in both the YouTube videos, just so you know how to get access to it. Registration is cut off on June 30th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so make sure you get your funds in. Ask any questions. You can tweet me, tweet Angela, tweet True, tweet Shelly, anyone. We even have a Facebook page, anything for Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. So we'll all be together the next hangout, which is, I didn't even give the date. The date is June 12th. 14th. It's the 12th, yeah. It's the 12th or the 14th, but our hangout is actually going to take place on July 12th. We'll be doing
that'll be after 9 o'clock Eastern?
It'll be 9 o'clock Eastern time, absolutely.
That'll be after the public talk and everything, too.
Absolutely. So,
awesome.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. For the people who tuned back in, thank you so much for tuning back in, even though we had our technical difficulties tonight. First time in 16 Hangouts that we've had that as an issue.
Yeah.
So we have to say the technology.
That's the only time she appreciates me asking questions.
Yes. And then
thank you, Shelly and Angela. Kept it rolling.
Just to give you the website, it's M as in Mary, AAGI Institute.org. That's MAAGI as in Isaac, Institute.org. Hey, I had to be sure. I worked in telemarketing.
Yes.
We spelled everything out just so people would know. So, anywho, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you on July 12th. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.